Marty had decided that he will come home early from work on Friday so that he will rest ahead of the hike with his friends the next day. It was a long and stressing week. Working as the secretary to a very demanding boss always made him long for the end of the week so he could relax and let off some steam. It's 3 weeks now since he and his friends have started preparing for this hike. His friends, like him, usually have busy weeks too fraught with working round the clock and struggling to keep up with deadlines. This hike was planned out of a shared concern to take out time to unwind and just take in all the beauty that surrounded them, yet remained unexplored. Most importantly, they wanted to be alone with God. 3 Sundays ago, during the revival week in their local church, Pastor Jenham had preached about Moses' encounter with the burning bush when he was in the open fields keeping watch over his father-in-law's sheep and goats. This soft-spoken general overseer of the Christ for All Assembly, with his neat mustache and glowing bald head, kept emphasizing that encounters were the result of retreats. In response to the pastor's impassioned appeal, they began planning for the hike. While it seemed it was just a hike, it was a prayer hike to them. Besides, they will be engaging in a physical exercise alongside a spiritual discipline. The hill behind Sabongari was chosen as the location for the hike. Marty and his 4 friends live in Sabongari. They decided to stay back here after graduation from the Plateau State Polytechnic. Joseph, all of them, except Dapo, were from Nasarawa State. He was Yoruba. His facial marks stood as a testimony. Sabongari was one of the new and developing settlements in the Plateau State capital of Joseph, located almost at the outskirts of the bubbling and bustling commercial capital of north-central Nigeria. The community seemed away from the touch of progress. Electricity was still trying to find its way into many of the homes there. Very few persons had taps too. A central borehole serviced most of the population here. The road leading into the community, if they could be called that, were completely untarred and rough, a big concern for car owners. Yet, its people were many and kept increasing daily. The pressures of city life and the skyrocketing cost of living was a daily push for people to seek cheaper homes, in a serene community like this. Rural settlers who also wanted to leave their rustic ways and embrace urban life found this neighborhood quite appealing. New building sites, in varying degrees of completion, dotted most of the expansive landscape here. Trees were scanty, but the greenery of the grasses and shrubs made up for this lack. Wild fruits like the local strawberries could also be found, here wedged between rocks and away from the winding paths that led to the top of this rough terrain. The rocky hills and the undulating plateaus further added beauty to the scenery. On some lucky days, one can easily run into fleeing reptiles. Other days will leave one swelling and sweating from the venom of a poisonous snake. Saturday came fast. Meetup time was 6:30 a.m. They wanted to set out before the sun becomes too hot. By 6:37 a.m., they had already started out. It was a beautiful morning. The sun was trying to peep its way out of the covers of darkness. A cold wind was also coming in gently from the hills north of the stream flowing at the opposite descent of the hill. As they began, animated chatters and conversations ensued between them. They discussed many things, from football, news to latest trends on Twitter. 30 minutes later, they could see the whole of Sabongari sprawled beneath them. One could easily take all of the site in a single view. Wow! I feel like one of the disciples of Jesus on top of the mountain of transfiguration. It was Sandra that quipped, almost breathless and gasping for air, as she tried to steady herself at the flat top of a cliff. She was the only lady in the company of the men. "You are a disciple of Jesus already." This was Marty quickly correcting her. "Or is there something you are not telling us?" Everyone laughed, except Sandra. She was fond of faking annoyance each time anyone in the group teased her. "They all look exhausted. They have been climbing and descending and tripping and slipping in the last 45 minutes. All the while, they were also singing, clapping and praying." The sun was up. It was already a few minutes before 9 a.m., luckily for them, it wasn't too hot. After finding a group of rocks that have formed a shelter-like corner, they decided to settle there. In the next few minutes, all they could do was pant and gulp water. "Now that we're here," George started, "it is good that each one takes a position and commune with God." George seemed the natural leader of the group. A man of few words, he was always serious and straight. They had very few hours to spend here and they knew they must make it count. They have also understood that time spent before God is never a waste. Marty and his friends have always committed to being more than nominal or average Christians. Part of their resolve was to find ways to do what they hear. Even as they were hiking, George reminded them to be deliberate about not being merely hearers of the word, but doers also. In obedience to that biblical command, they set out to retreat so as to have an encounter with God again. After 3 hours of prayers and meditation, Marty, Sandra, Dapo and George came together to round up their prayer hike. "I had a great time today," Sandra started. "Me too," the others chorused in unison. "Let's do this more often." "What do you guys think?" George asked them. Everyone agreed. Dapo, with his deep voice, cut in, "Like Moses, I actually thought I will see a burning bush. All the same, I feel the fire of the Holy Spirit burning inside me right now." "Glory," they all screamed. It was almost 2 p.m., they all agreed they have stayed long on this mountain and it was time to go home.